Okay, there we go. We're a little bit better. And first of all, Bob, thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm going to introduce these two in just a second, but I want to kind of frame this conversation. He introduced it, we were going to, about EOS, and maybe to step back a little bit, is we knew that to have a good conversation of resilience, we need to start the day with you kind of beginning to hear it and more feel it. And so there's going to be two parts to the next 40 minutes or so. The second part I want to prepare you for. You all have a handout. It's on your desk or on your table. Got it. I saw a thumb go up. Thank you very much for the feedback. On it, there's going to be 4 questions. So in a minute, after we get done, you get done meeting these two leaders, you're going to be asked to think about these questions for you and answer one of them. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head. That's the conversation part of this. The first part is for us to have the conversation we're kind of expecting you to have, but you get to meet Kelly and Nate. And to kind of maybe frame when I was asked, hey, Scott, let's do a resilience conversation, who would you bring? And I have the greatest job in the world in the sense that I get to work with between 150 and 200 leaders at any one point in time over the course of a year, and these two popped into my head. Kelly Plawinski, COO, integrator at Adam Evaluation, you heard, and Nate Beans, COO, I call him the integrator at Grand Rapids Center for Community Transformation. The reason they jumped out is, one is I've got to watch them lead. The last 5 years I worked with them, and to be in a room with them, watching them actually lead, watching them deal with whatever's coming at them, and they just stand out to me. They got some grit, they have some heart, and frankly, they're people I look up to. So I'm so excited to introduce you to them today. So with that, was that good enough introduction for you? Is that good enough? Okay, well, I'm going to let you start real quick, and we're going to start with Kelly. Kelly, real quick introduction on what you do. And the first question I want both of you, and the theme has already kind of been here, and the theme for all of you is how would you define resilience? So quick introduction, and what's your definition of resilience?
Sure, yeah, so Kelly Plawinski. I've been in Grand Rapids for 5 years. I came from the east side of the state. Bob mentioned manufacturing. I came from Ford, so I feel the manufacturing in my soul. When Scott mentioned resilience and what does it mean to me, it's not something I think about, but looking back, we've all experienced a lot of things in the last 3+ years that have really led to resilience. And I think about calm confidence when I hear resilience. That's calm confidence is what I hear or what I think of.
Nate, same to you. A little intro, how do you define resilience?
Yeah, so Nate Bean, born and raised southeast side of Grand Rapids. Again, the COO of the Center for Transformation. My role is essentially basically equipping, mobilizing, and aligning 6 different organizations and leaders, 3 nonprofits, 3 for-profits, really around a single vision, which is to create opportunities for transformation. And so I do that by really driving execution, and again, kind of aligning them all under this single vision towards some collective and collaborative goals. When I first thought about this idea of resilience, I was thinking, man, you gotta be kidding me. How am I gonna share some things about resilience when at a time where I'm not feeling very resilient? And then I started thinking, well, maybe perhaps that's just the thing, right? Is like to be resilient is to keep getting up, to keep doing that thing over and over again when you don't feel like it. It doesn't feel good, right? Just to keep going, to have that grit. And so I really define resilience as just the ability to push through extreme difficulties, to be able to adapt to challenges that come your way. But also I would say over time, hopefully, to begin to gain a perspective that really all of life's suffering is kind of life's way of kind of molding us into who we were meant to be. So I think over time, I hope that resilience would build into perspective change as well.
And Nate, a question hit us when we were talking earlier. Grand Rapids Center for Community Transformation. I mean, you're in the business of transformation. We can, again, if you want to know more about that, catch Nate at a break. But oftentimes the words we use, we talk about resilience. The word transformation comes up all the time when we interact. How do, in your mind, you live both of them? How do those connect?
Yeah. So I would say, in short, I mean, transformation, although a lot of times we want to think about it as like an end result or a desired outcome, but by and large, transformation is a journey. It's a process, and so I would say that the tie is really that resilience is really a key ingredient in allowing us to continue to engage in our transformation journey. It's one, if not maybe the most key ingredient in the recipe, I would say, of transformation.
So let's now put it on a person. So the first question, and you guys can all see the question, is a person in your life that if you were going to hold up and say, man, that's resilience personified, who's it for you?
Yeah. So I thought a little bit about this, and I would say my 16-year-old daughter. She actually officially adopted her at the age of 9. I'd been raising her since she was 1. And in her early childhood, she dealt with some significant challenges, experiences with her biological father, which was just super hard for any young person at that age to be able to reconcile, to deal with some of the emotional damage and things that took place. And so she also was recently, in the last couple of years, diagnosed with like a mild heart condition that just has all kinds of frustrating symptoms, physical symptoms. And through all that, she has just remained incredibly positive. She's a 4.0 GPA student at the toughest school, the academically here in Michigan, high school. She's turning into a great artist, musician. She's taking control over her physical and mental health, having some extreme breakthroughs in counseling. And so she, in my opinion, is just somebody who has not allowed her past, her pain to define her future. And she really has, I would say, transformed her pains and her wounds into a transformative, into being a transformative person.
It's a great story, you know, and it maybe it kind of flies in the face a little bit of oftentimes what we think is that resilience is about age. Wisdom comes with age, and that's not necessarily true. I mean, that's a great example. Kelly, what about you?
Yeah, so thinking about it a little bit, honestly, the person that just kept popping in my mind is my husband.
Is he here, by the way?
He's not here.
Oh,
'cause he had to be
shoot,
with
we
the
had an
kids,
opportunity,
You know, all this stuff. But some of you know my husband, Todd. He's just a really calm person. And I mentioned earlier, calm and confident. And Todd he is that. He's that person in our family, even in our extended family, that everyone calls when something comes up or they're not sure how to handle something. And that's my extended family, not his extended family. Even at home, right? He's always calm through situations. Spring break a few months ago, our basement flooded and we were in Phoenix. And like, what can you do? What can you do? And he's just calm and works through it very methodically. He's more introverted than I am, so his thoughts are well thought out before they come out of his mouth. But he's very resilient from anything that comes his way. He's unflappable. Is a term I connect with resilience.
Yeah, and it's, we're challenged with when we, what's the criteria? And it's funny how those people in life, it's like, who do we always pick up? Who's on speed dial all the time? So the next question then is, let's maybe get a little bit more personal. In your own leadership journey, what has been a key resilience building event for you?
For me personally, because we're going to talk about personal, right? Is that
was the
kind
question?
of whole? Okay. So when I was younger, I was a new analyst. Like I mentioned, I worked for Ford. I was at an assembly plant. So my first job was at an assembly plant in a suburb of Detroit. A young woman working in a plant. I walked the plant floor often. You needed to for various reasons. And I ran into a situation where I was catcalled by somebody on the line. And I don't remember, it wasn't terrible, it wasn't like something that was horrible, but I remember thinking about it, and what I did was I had built up a good rapport with the different supervisors of the different areas, and I went to the area manager, and I just told him what happened, and it wasn't a big deal, and he didn't make a big deal about it, but he dealt with it. And I think looking back, that was a foundational moment for me as a leader, because I learned that you speak up. If something happens, you speak up. And as a leader, I spoke up and he did something. And to me, it could have gone very different. He could have not done something. He could have laughed. He could have done something inappropriate. Who knows? But looking back, I think that it kind of molded who I am, and that I always say something when I see something. I'm always calling out the elephant in the room, and I'm never afraid. And I think that leader, he helped instill that in me because of that experience. I don't think about that often, but trying to dig deep preparing for this, I do think it was a foundational moment.
And that story is interesting to me, Kelly, because I see you on the other side. Like, I see that courage come out all the time, and you always wonder where that comes from in people. So that's a great story. Nate, same to you. What key event for you?
So I think for me, it's a little bit of blend of kind of personal and organizational. I think when you're in the work of, city transformation and trying to transform organizations, businesses, people, the work gets messy. I mean, everywhere from having floods in our building to one of our buildings burning down to clients' deaths, deaths of students that we work with due to violence, staff members passing away through COVID. Those for me were all kind of resilient building events. And I think it was my brother as well as my mentor, who and business partner who I work with, who told me, Nate, God always, he's the most talented, most strategic investor in the world, and he will never waste any of your painful experiences or challenges. All the highs and lows will always use for a greater good. And so I think that was a pivotal moment for me in reflecting on all of those things and thinking that really led me to kind of this mental shift of being able to think about all of these challenges, these obstacles, these painful moments as really opportunities for growth for myself as well as for others. So.
And organizationally, how have you seen that resilience building? I mean, COVID, you mentioned a lot of big events. How does that play? I mean, is it bearing any fruit today for your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the COVID was obviously a big one. I mean, everything from losing, contracts, lost revenues, staff transitions, sickness throughout the organization. We actually, the staff members who stick around kind of remember the COVID-19 era as the time where we truly grew as a team. There was this, or not where I would say where we became a team, where there was a sense of that we were kind of going to war with each other, right? Where we're fighting for our livelihood. We're building trust based on vulnerability. And that was a sense. I think that was a time where we really came together as a team. And grew, and so now I think we're seeing the positive effects of sort of that strength of being able to go through such a difficult time together. It's funny what suffering will often do to a group of people when you're really feeling like you're having to fight together. You build a sense of resiliency, and so we're seeing that.
Yeah. Your comments, two things. One is we already talked about mentorship up here. I mean, Carlos was up here. It sounds like mentors often played a huge point. It kind of helped you frame something so you can learn from it, which, again, role of mentorship can play in our lives in terms of building us. The second part is how an event like that can actually build it, and people don't even know it necessarily, but they become stronger, and that's kind of cool. So, Kelly, for Atomy, organization, key resilience building.
Yeah. I tried to think of something more creative, but it's really COVID. I mean, it's hard to
I got both
that.
your answers. I'm like, COVID and COVID.
Yeah,
okay,
COVID
here
and
we go.
I mean, I've been at Atomy for 5 years, and COVID was 3 of that. So it was really COVID. Sending the team home, there was a lot of scary moments. Everybody in the world largely was impacted by COVID, but us as leaders were really impacted because we had to make decisions that I didn't feel equipped to make. No one was making these decisions for us. There was not very much guidance, as those of you who experienced this as well remember. What I found for our company, though, was that my foundation and what I felt my job was to do was to maintain trust. And you mentioned trust as well, Nate. That if people trust you, there's a level of comfort. We look at Lencioni's pyramid, and the bottom level is trust. If you don't have trust, you can't build up to results. I had to maintain results so I could maintain jobs for the people that worked for me. And so maintaining that level of trust was really important so that they continued to trust Nick and I as leaders. And I did that through communication, open and honest communication. I didn't know the answers, and I would tell them I didn't know the answers. Or, this is the decision I've made, and here is why. And there's no right choice here. So I think that was a really good, like Nate said, we came out of COVID so much stronger than we went together, because we did. We experienced this really traumatic thing together. But we're stronger because of it. Bob mentioned EOS. We are an EOS company. I think EOS is a foundation that helped us through COVID. Would we have made it without EOS? Absolutely. Would we have been as successful? We wouldn't have, because it provides a backbone and a structure and a playbook to follow. And as a leader, if you have a playbook to follow, you don't have to worry about how to run the business. You just have to worry about the big things that come up. You're just following the rules. And I like that about EOS, and I think it helped us. It helps with the resilience. It helps you so you can focus on things you need to focus on that require resilience.
And Kelly, I can think of many, many times where you said, okay, here's communication. Well, here's what we know, and we're going to tell them, and we're going to tell them this is what we're not sure yet, but we're working on it. And I hear that a lot as we work together. We're going to, it's kind of a wrap up. And so in 20 minutes, we went from tell me about yourself to the last question is going to be, give us one way in which your resilience is being tested today. Kelly?
Yeah.
Could be personal or organizational.
Yeah, there's a few things right now. Recruiting is hard for everybody. That's like a common one. So recruiting is hard, finding the right person. I think there's plenty of people out there. It's just finding that exact right person. And our growth strategy is growing outside of West Michigan. So choosing markets, practice areas, all these different variables, that is a tough one. The other one is AI. Like, what's happening there? I'm not sure. I'm sure paying attention to it. I'll tell you that much.
Nate, what about you?
Yeah, I would say like with our unique organization, again, it being a collaborative, there's multiple organizations, and we've just had a couple of big kind of staff transitions on the leadership side. And so for me, being the integrator and CEO, it's like I find myself often having to, come down into levels of the organization that I just don't desire to come down into anymore. And so after 15 years of kind of seeing people come and go and the ebbs and flows of that, and having some tough transitions in terms of leadership transitions, that's it's testing me. Like, man, do I have it to go through another transition like this, where I'm trying to move a new key leadership person in, and all the protecting of culture that comes with that, and the nonstop communication and recasting of the vision and building trust. It's just a lot. It just wears on you. So that's it.
It's funny, again, COVID and talent. Imagine that. So here we're back again. So again, we want to make a little transition here. And this is where you saw a conversation here. We gave you 4 questions in front of you to kind of begin to, again, take resilience out of the PowerPoints and into your own lives, either personal or professional. So here's the assignment. Over the next, say, 10 to 12 minutes, we aren't going to have a ton of time. I want you to look at these 4 questions on this page and pick one. And what you're going to do, I'm going to give you about 60 seconds to think about it. Then when your table's ready, I literally just want you to go around the table and share a quick introduction of yourself and share your answer to that question. So everyone hold up one finger. One question. And by the way, thanks for holding up the right finger. I was a little bit worried about asking that question with this crowd. So with that, I'm going to turn you loose in about 10 minutes. I'm going to bring you back. We're going to have a little bit table report out, and then we're going to get on the rest of the program. So the floor is yours. Think about your answers and start talking. Okay. I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. I'm not going to ask you how many people didn't have enough time to talk, because I'll get the evaluation and say, we need more time. You're always going to need more time. So the good news is you have the rest of the day if you didn't hear a story. Real quick, anybody implementing an ERP system right now? Okay, Carl, table 6, you had to do one and they delivered it to you in German? Yeah, so anyone who thinks it's a resilience building event, if you're doing ERP right now, just FYI. And Carl got one in German he had to decipher. So anyway, that was a great story. So it's funny when you walk around, you hear the stories, and that's the richness of today. So real quickly, I had our 2 panelists come up here. Kelly's right out here. I'm going to have to do a quick report out of just things they heard from their table. I hopefully you guys knew she was eavesdropping on you, right? So Kelly, real quick, I mean, any report outs? You please stand up.
Yeah, I don't think my mic's on.
It will be in just a second.
All right, there we go. So I'm at a Corewell Health table, so you can all imagine the resilience they've been going through for the last 3-4 years, and then there's a merger. One thing I noticed is that they didn't talk about COVID. And I think, and you brought that up, Matt, at the end, I think the fact that they didn't talk about COVID, they talked about what they're going through now shows resilience, that they went through COVID as frontline people and individuals and are still talking about other things, right? They've moved on. You mentioned, and I can't see your name because your name tag's flicked, but Lynn mentioned that in healthcare and in their world, they always have to go into every day with the glass half full. You just have to. And I think that's really resounding. And I heard 2 stories here from 2 gentlemen that worked at hospitals or led hospitals that both went through floods and had, like, it's ironic that you both had that same experience in different places, different times, but having to get all the residents out and then basically triage the building, right, so that people could come back in. I think our healthcare workers are really the most resilient of all of us in this room, so that's for sure.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a couple conversations. I can remember a few leaders coming in saying, okay, now it's time to look forward. And take what we learned and let's look forward. So that's great. Nate, real quick.
Yeah. So a couple things. I mean, a couple folks just shared about, took the question of individuals who really personified resilience, and I think that through kind of hearing them share a little bit, it was clear that, you know, they were kind of able to, that those were individuals that they really gleaned on and kind of drew strength from. One person being their mother and another being their wife, that they really looked to them for strength, and how seeing them being more resilient really made them be able to better embody that and live into that idea of resilience. And then quite a few other people mentioned just how I shared up there about staff transitions and the challenges of leadership, and just how it can be taxing to have to come down into levels of organizations when you know, other people transition into new jobs. But also these individuals shared that for them it was also an opportunity to get people a little bit closer to the vision, to clean up some things, to reinforce the cultural values. And so I think that was interesting about kind of sharing and also seeing those staff transitions and kind of being able to reinforce their values and their vision through those staff transitions as really an opportunity to continue to clarify their mission and vision. So,
You know, it's funny, resilience doesn't necessarily get built by standing up here and people down there, right? It's getting into the trenches a little bit. That's a great learning. Well, we're going to start transitioning to the next part. I think, Bob, you can come up and couple things to wrap this up. First of all, and again, we recognize this isn't enough time to talk. The good news is you have the whole rest of the day. Recognize that, and this kind of goes back to Nate's last point, resilience loves community. In fact, resilience needs community. Very rarely do we go through anything by ourselves and get more resilient. Now, sometimes it does, but a lot of times it's when people walk up next to us, give us perspective, or when people walk up next to us and pick us up, carry us along until we can walk again. And so your job, your opportunity over the rest of the day is continue to share those stories. Continue to kind of maybe ask, tell me a little bit more about that. The other thing is, at the end of today, you're going to have a lot of stuff. You're going to have a lot of information. The day is full of some really, really good people talking. Your challenge is going to be, okay, now what? And there's a couple things on the back of your sheet. There's a few extra resources. You can learn a little bit more about Nate, you can learn a bit more about Kelly. And there's one, it's create a more resilient organization yourself. Just some thoughts from me is how do you digest this and spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes over a cup of coffee tomorrow? And say, okay, now what? What do I go do with this? So I really would encourage you to take what you learned today and to go and apply it in the world in which you live in, because leaders make a huge impact on people. And with that, Nate and Kelly, can we give them a round of applause for willingness to...